I don't believe that balance exists. I believe it's wholeness.
I'm whole to begin with, but I have work to do.
Wholeness to me is being able to be your own bridge to your heart, through your heart.
I didn't know much about Qigong when I was introduced to Nicholas Blewett, but I have to say I am a fan. In this episode, Nicholas explains how it is a powerful method that triggers the body's natural healing mechanisms. He helps us understand that it is how we connect our mind and body that governs our overall peace of mind and how we experience personal well-being and vitality.
Qigong, for me, came as part of a practice. So when I was very young, I moved interstate from my parents, which here in Australia is a long way. Like I'm 2,000 kilometers away. I set up my life here to do architectural drafting. I wanted to be an architect. I decided toward the end of that course that sitting in front of a computer was probably not where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. And so I dropped out of that and I just started mooching around trying to decide what to do. And I went to get a job at SeaWorld, the Australians' version of SeaWorld. And on my first day there, I met a Welshman, a guy who'd come over from Wales in the United Kingdom to study Tai Chi. Now, I'll probably pronounce Tai Chi Tai-Chi because that's the Chinese way of selling it. But he came over to learn Tai Chi from an Australian master. But unlike the Tai Chi that most people are aware of, which is the slow, like meditation moves, originally Tai Chi is a martial art, and not a lot of people still practice it that way. It's the slow side of Tai Chi that has tended to become socially prominent, but the martial art aspect of it still flitters around in different circles. And so on the first day, a conversation with him around that became that the martial arts teach you about the healing aspect of Tai Chi, and the healing aspect teaches you about the martial, the self-defense aspect. So I really liked this reciprocal relationship between the martial arts and the healing, because I grew up in a country town. There were a lot of people who did karate. They were kind of the bullies and kind of like the meatheads, you know, kind of rednecks. And so it never really fascinated me. But through talking with him, I really got this idea of how Tai Chi was a complete practice about self-defense and about healing. And this really represented to me that yin and yang polarity of life. And so I started training with him in the Tai Chi, in the martial arts, and Qigong was part of the training of the internal martial arts. So let me just take this a step further, just to kind of point out where this goes. So a lot of people think that Qigong is a set of postures or a set of movements. And it's actually not right, Michelle. What Qigong is, it's actually a way of moving. And it's this way of moving that has all the benefits. Now, of course, surely the postures and movements, they do move the body in certain ways, which pump and move the chi and the energy around the body for healing and to do other work. But the main perspective is the way of moving. And so right back in ancient history, some Chinese martial artists went, hey, this Qigong's really handy for certain aspects that would actually benefit our martial arts training. Let's incorporate that into what we do. And so it may be like a boxer. Boxers don't always spar. They practice shadow boxing and they fight an imaginary opponent. And so the martial artists started using the way of moving in Qigong to form like a meditative shadow boxing routine where they were still doing martial arts like movements, but they were getting all the health benefits, all the neurological benefits, all the biochemical benefits, all the meditation benefits of the Qigong practice, of a moving meditation. And so that became what is known as Tai Chi. The martial arts kind of got taken out, and most people just know of the Tai Chi. So I say to a lot of people that Tai Chi is Qigong. And they go, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you know how you have yoga
Mhm.
and you have all these different sorts of yoga coming off this main yoga term or this main practice, and people can practice all different styles of yoga. You've got Qigong, and you've got all these different styles of Qigong that came from all the different families and all the different provinces. And essentially it's a way of moving. And so Tai Chi just is one way of doing Qigong. Now, the biggest difference is that Tai Chi is probably slightly more complex and slightly more difficult. The movements are still roughly based around martial arts, and so they require a lot more concentration, a lot more focus, a lot more practice, and a lot more memory. Whereas Qigong tends to focus more on the moving meditation, the health, and all the mindset gifts that Qigong give you, as opposed to the complexity. And so even though my first love is Tai Chi and the martial arts, I really see that Qigong holds within itself a really super important message for society. And so I decided to really promote those aspects of Qigong out into the public, because I believe it should be as popular as yoga for the benefits that it gives us. And so Qigong is a movement meditation that corrects the body structure, that helps you to heal injuries, that allows you to ground your energy and become grounded in your person. It's a cellular aspect. It's a biochemical reality of being grounded, of being centered, of having clear, focused mindset, of concentration, of bringing the mind to infuse back into the body and to really engage the spirit and our soul to invoke us with energy and create a practice that really enlivens our whole the whole perspective, the whole range of human mind, body, and soul connection. So
I was able to do a 5-day workshop with you, and I learned so much. I thought it was so amazing to combine the understanding of, it wasn't just an exercise class. I was learning about myself. In fact, I wrote down to myself, or a note to myself, as I said, I felt like I was learning how my body works. It was almost like how it made so much sense, not just physiologically, although that was a part of it, but the way that you kind of explained how these things work together and how they, whether it's symbolically or metaphorically or physically, just how they work with each other with that body, mind, spirit, it just made so much sense. And it really felt true. So here I'm in this like kind of an exercise program, but I've had these feelings of truth come up a lot as you were describing how our body works, and I really liked it. So tell everybody to do that. But and so I liked the learning and the exercise. Like it wasn't just an exercise program. It was an education in about my body, how it worked and what supported it, and why you would do certain things, how it would support it, And I also love that you were willing to say, you knew when to say, okay, there's tension here, or this is going to be difficult, and to learn to accept that, what's brought in the mind, right? That's the mind part of it, all of that kind of thing. But the first thing you talk about, the first thing you kind of go with is breath, so let's talk about breath for a minute. Teach us a little bit about that. What do you want to say about breath?
Yeah. Okay. About breath. So just to bring it in from what you just spoke about, which was great. And thank you for coming on the challenge. I loved having you there. It was really nice. Is that what I've come to understand about Qigong and about shamanism and about ancient cultures and different religions and different philosophies, is that the human body in the ancient cultures actually stored information within our bodies, within movement and like our cellular neurological connections. And so first and foremost, I actually see Qigong as a way of embodying philosophy and life principles. And so that we actually embody them. And I explain this to people. It's like when you peel a banana and you walk up to a bin and you've got the banana in one hand, the peel in the other, and you throw the peel in the bin, and then you realize that was the banana and you're left holding the peel. And you're like, why did that happen? Like, I know better than that. I knew. Why did my body respond differently from that which I knew? And I think just as humans, we might do that occasionally when we turn around and go, why did I respond that way? I knew different. And so Qigong is about infusing philosophy and principles and virtue and merit into our body. And so what we really want to do to create a state within our body where that becomes transmissible, is we want to infuse breath with body with the spirit. And so when we start with the breathing mechanics, I actually bring in a hack that I was actually taught from a Western perspective, that when I first learned it, I was like, oh, wow, like this fills in gaps on what I'd been taught from Qigong, which actually teaches us to correctly engage our diaphragm, switch off the secondary, the ancillary breathing muscles. Now, the ancillary or the secondary breathing muscles are like a backup generator. And if we're not engaging our diaphragm as our primary breathing mechanism, the ancillary breathing muscles in our head and shoulder, in our neck and shoulder switch on, and we end up with shoulders up around our neck. We're shallow breathing. We're probably getting anxiety. We're all caught up in our head. We're flustered. So we really need to start learning to bring that breath down. And the Chinese would say to anchor this into lower Dantian. And I'll talk about Dantian in a little bit, I think. But when we anchor this into our lower body, the Chinese would say we're getting root. We're pulling ourselves down and we're gaining this root, this center and this groundedness. And so the first thing to do is to realize that breath, body, and mind should not be separated. And so by bringing the breath back into diaphragmatic breathing and going through the steps I did, I find it's a good way for people to discover that the body actually breathes. We don't breathe here. And often when we meditate, a teacher, a master will say, focus on the breath. And so we start thinking with our mind, breathe in, breathe out. I need to breathe in slower. I need to breathe out. And so we're caught up in the monkey mind when we should be just observing breath and observing it as a happening, not mentally engaging in the process of breathing. So when I can bring it back down to the diaphragmatic mechanisms and get that happening, I can go, this is mental breathing. Think, breathe in, breathe out. Now let's stop that and let's let our body breathe. And for any dog, cat owners, or people with small children out there, when you look at your dog or your cat or your baby and it's asleep, you see its body breathing. Now, when the body actually breathes correctly, we set off our vagus nerve. It's a natural reaction of the body. It puts us into a state of rest and digest. It makes us receptive. It makes us open. It allows our body to be soft and regenerative. And Stanford University have done a research into actually learning to direct control of your diaphragm mentally actually means that you recover from exercise faster. So people with poor diaphragmatic control probably have poor regeneration. And so bringing everything back into the breath to begin with and seeing how movement is a function of breath, breath is a function of movement, and then learning to switch off our mind so we can observe brings that mind, body, and breath all back into alignment. When that happens, the Chinese would say that we begin to build up what the three treasures or the three substances, which are pure essences within inside our body that make the rest of our body, that make up the body matrix itself. And we want to build up these substances for longevity, for health, to embody more spirit, to be stronger, to have more resilience, and have all the human qualities that make us robust, capable, clear adults, and not kind of dysfunctional, struggling, caught up in our heads, anxiety, depression, our body's breaking down, we're sore. That's the idea of Qigong, is to really build up that facility of our body, to build up those substances, to build longevity and make us really healthy and robust animals.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. As you're talking, I think we naturally want more of this, but maybe we turn to sugar or caffeine or things like that, right?
Yes,
when
yes.
it's our breath. And I think it's so fascinating that to think about, because we think about breathing as getting the air into our bodies, but it's also a message. We're sending a message out and we're bringing a message in. I think that's so interesting. With healing and with trauma work, a lot of times I can look at someone's movements, I can look at how they hold themselves, and I can see what their trauma was. So if they have their shoulders more like this, I can see that they were put upon. If they look kind of like this, I can see their trauma was different. I can see that. And so I never thought about, and this is what I loved and I learned in the workshop, the challenge is that I loved that the idea, it just like occurred to me that I thought, oh, I can flip that. So where I'm looking for the message to come out, I can also use movement to send a message in to my body. And I just hadn't thought about that. I guess I've thought of yoga and that type of thing as being able to, as more of exercise, right? And although this is very helpful, it's very good and healthy for your body, there's this dynamic to it of intention that I just thought was so fantastic. I just think it's so great. So I can't wait for members of the library to get some of your information. So tell us a little bit about that Dantian, because I thought that was a fascinating model.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I will do. I just wanted to respond with you with what you're saying with the body. So our body posture dictates a lot about what's going on the inside. And there's that fantastic book, The Body Keeps the Score with Trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Another way to think of Qigong is that we are creating a neutral state within our body.
Mm-hmm.
And so Chinese essentially believe that tension is disease, and we have two different types of tension. Now, Michelle, I thought you might ask me about the Dantian, so I actually have my drawing board set up right beside me, ready to go. So I always like to be organized.
Yeah, it was so helpful. It was so helpful to see that.
Let's see that.
Yeah.
So just before we get into Dantian, and what I was just saying then is we have two different types of pressure in the world. One of the ways I like to explain this is by picturing us as a balloon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, with our Qigong and with that drawing in of the breath, we are trying to fill ourselves up with what we would call in Qigong as internal tension. Now, internal tension is quite healthy. And if the skin of the balloon was our body, it would keep it nice and open. It would keep the pressure nice and even. And so we would float through the world quite happily in that regard. However, life isn't always life, right?
Right.
Always isn't easy. And so we can have external tension or external pressure placed onto the outside of our body from outside, stress, studies, whatever it might be, work. And so what we want to do in Qigong is make sure that we have enough on the inside to keep our body nice and open and powerful and have that energy to use, as opposed to letting pressures push in on our body. Otherwise, what tends to happen is we'll end up like a balloon like this, and life has pushed in on us and created our internal to compress. What this will also do is this puts tension into our body in different ways. Or it might also have areas that become very soft and loose. And so this softness or tightness, this external tension, is where emotions, physical trauma, and different things are held in the body. And so what we're trying to do in our Qigong is create this neutral, nice and open tensegrity and release all these pockets of tension so our body opens up to be a nice inflated balloon as opposed to a balloon which is compressed and pushed in. Now, the other way that this can happen is in a balloon that's nice and blown up, we have lots of air. Well, let's just imagine that's like structural density. So our body is nice and strong and can keep itself open because it's robust. There's a lot of strength. Whereas in this balloon, there's not much. Okay? So what Qigong does is it actually fills up this internal pressure. So we find a lot of empaths, energy workers, or just people who are stressed, people who might be being manipulated, abused by friends, co-workers, whatever it is. It's like their balloon has popped and they're letting out air and they're not putting any back in. And so over time, they become deficient, deflated. Their body will either become weak or super tense, and that will form disease. So the Chinese say that tension is disease, but this internal tension is what helps us push that out.
Right. It's like a yin and yang. They're both part of the whole. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, for the Dantian, we actually have 3 Dantian or 3 balloons lined up over the top of each other. We have our head, we have our torso, and we have our pelvis, and our legs would be down here. There. Okay. So these 3 Dantian do the same thing. They actually are spaces in our body that we want to keep open. Now, the important thing here is there isn't a magical force field diamond in my body. We're actually talking about the physical shape of the pelvis, the physical shape of the chest and abdomen, the physical shape of the head. And what happens is when we end up with tension in an area through the body, is our diamond might end up looking more like like that, all bent out of shape. Bones are twisted, muscles are tight, areas might be weak and flaccid. And when this happens, our energy doesn't move smoothly. And so what Qigong is doing is it's building up the strength within these Dantian to open our body into be the most complete shape for us genetically, and to fill us with chi and blood and energy and all the things that we want to function in the world as our most capable selves. But when this energy begins to get used and we don't have enough on the inside, as I said, that all begins to shrink down and we don't have the energy or the fortitude to really move through life as we might like to.
You know, I think what's tricky is we want to fix that and we go into effort. You know, we go into efforting it, which is almost in contrast. And I loved in the program and you would talk a lot about more relaxing into it. I don't know if that's the right word, but it wasn't as efforting it. You know, it's not a movement of and you even talk about the word neutral too. It's like, so talk a little bit about, you know, how that's so different. I think those words are different because I think if we think about it, what we think we're looking for is the opposite of neutral or this effort or this hard work, you know, kind of a thing. And
it's not built into our society. And so one way to have an analogy around this is something I call the Band-Aid effect. And the Band-Aid effect is like, we'll just put a Band-Aid here and we'll just put it, instead of fixing the whole system,
right?
You know, the problem that's systemic, we go to signs and symptoms, which we do in Western medicine, right? There's lots of drugs for the sign and symptom. What do we do to that cause? So what we do is we go, oh, okay, well, there's a lot of tension in this part. Let's work that muscle. Oh, there's not much here. Let's work this muscle. And so we're trying to pull it back into alignment. However, we're just putting a Band-Aid on and strengthening this one might cause this one to go and working on this one might cause this one to go. And so it's like we end up chasing our own tail and getting super defeated. However, what we want to do, and it, as you said, it's counterintuitive from a Western mindset. Now, the Chinese have a term Wu Wei. Have you ever come across it?
It sounds familiar. Yes.
Yeah. It's used a lot. Wu Wei often means
yes,
not force is one of the best translations you can have. So it's work without working in a sense, and it really requires us to surrender. However, if surrendering and relaxing and being soft was super easy and going slow was super easy, do you think we'd probably do it more often and not be out of balance to begin with?
Right.
Yeah, right. But it's so counterintuitive and it's so opposite to our mindset that we continually force. And so we've got this shape and we're trying to get it all into place and doing this exercise and that exercise, as opposed to actually just stopping, softening, and allowing our body to return to a neutral state. Now, I also believe there's a time to do exercise, to do yoga, to do weights, to do running, to do those. We're designed for that. The problem is that we never take the time to actually release the tension out of our body and return it back to a balanced state. And after a lifetime of that, we're often quite warped and so out of shape that the effort required to return ourselves to that balanced shape can be filled with its own kind of difficulties and nuances, because learning to do that is its own challenge. And did you find, like I often talk about, Qigong literally means energy work, Qi work. Did you definitely find there was a work? Even though it was counterintuitive, there was an effort there. And it's really that effort, that gong, that is us learning to soften, pushing ourselves through those boundaries and learning to actually step back and fall into that Wu Wei of allowing nature to take its course, allowing ourselves to fall back into alignment with the way that nature wants things to unfold, as opposed to being a contrived human being and trying to force things into the way that we want them to be, which gives us expectations, which then is quite often what defeats us in life. So
when I say even that effort, I think it's like, I'm just going to will it to be, you're just going to will it to be, versus that softening. And you use that a lot, like softening into it and actually allowing and actually being with and actually, I just, like we say, it's counterintuitive. And yet I feel like that's where so much healing comes, is when we move into those kinds of states and those kinds of experiences to give us support, to give us support.
And one of the things you find when sorry to cut you off, when you do start going through this process, is that your body gets softer. You get more space in your body. You get more time because your mind's clearer. The focus and the intentfulness as things fall back into balance give us a natural state of flow, as opposed to, as you said, of will, or of trying to force things to happen. And people often find that time and the space and the softness and relaxation of their body gives them back movement, gives them back access to parts of their personality and freedom and joy, and it helps to release negative emotions. And it's not something that we need to actively engage necessarily. It's that tension or that shape within the body dissipates and that emotion gets released. And we might have a big teary, we might get angry, whatever happens. And then, like the Buddha said, that too is impermanent. That will disappear and your body will just return back. And you'll be like, where did all this freedom inside my body come from? And this joy, like, I actually just feel good. So I find that one of the most rewarding things when people start to have those experiences with themselves and with their body, because like often people haven't felt that since they were a child, or, from one or two periods in their life where they actually felt truly fulfilled. But it really allows us to create that state within ourselves as kind of a daily beingness.
Yeah. Do you have any stories like of people that you can share about their experiences and how that changed them?
Yeah. So I actually have now a very close friend, but at the time someone I knew, and then they're a health, sorry, they're not a health coach, but they're a business coach, very successful, have a large clientele. And this individual was starting to get a little bit later in life to want a baby, but that was her thing. She'd always wanted it. She's not in a relationship, so she was going through IVF to have a baby, but her health wasn't permitting her. And every IVF session didn't go as planned. And so she called me, and we've been friends, and she'd been doing a bit of Qigong with me, and she's like, okay, so you're like one of the most naturally healthy people I know. Like, it's not like you're doing anything extreme, but you just kind of have this groove. What are your 10 top values around health? And, you know, I'm a health coach, and I've been an acupuncturist and Chinese medical doctor for 23 years and into my Qigong for nearly 30. And I'm like, I can't tell you what my 10 values are. Give me 36 hours to think about this and I'll come up with a list. Let's do this. And so I wrote my list and I did what everyone else did. I'm like, well, eat well and get exercise. And then I kind of stopped and I was like, it's not really my top values. Otherwise, I'd have a strict diet. Otherwise, I'd be really strict in all these different things. What is it? And I'm like, my first value is creating space. And having that pliability, the moldability, the dexterity to turn, pivot. You know, yeah, if I'm hungry and the only thing around is junk food, but I'm hungry and I know that I'm not performing, you know, my mind's distracted, yeah, I'll go and eat it. My body will deal with it. Doesn't mean I always do it, but I'm then not going to beat myself up for having a McDonald's burger, right? It's not like I do it often, but I will. And very early on, I turned vegetarian when I was 13, hardcore vegan by 19, kind of when I started my Tai Chi training. But then by 24, I was pretty unwell and I was studying Chinese medicine. So I thought to myself, I'm big enough and ugly enough to test this theory out. So let's eat a little bit of meat and see the difference it'll make in my body. And I started to eat a little bit. And for me and my disposition, my health and my stamina just went up like instantly.
Wow.
I was like, right, this must be a good thing for me. But my mindset was so that meat was bad. I was still stuck in that paradigm for me. And vegetarianism works for people. Veganism works for other people.
Right.
Not so much for me at this time, right? And I was so stuck in that mindset that I would only eat very specific foods. I had to go to very specific shops to get my very specific foods. If they weren't available, then I'd just go hungry until I could, which made me very deficient, made me very weak, and wasn't good for my mental health, really. And I still remember the day when there was a dirty bakery, like sausage rolls and pies. I don't know if you had like in the States, like just would they be junk food? I guess they're junk food. They're probably not great food, but they're not bad, right? And just this day, like the smell and everything. And I'd started eating a little bit of meat and I was like, I'm so hungry. I'm just going to grab one of these dirty sausage rolls and I'm going to eat it. And if you've ever been drunk and you've eaten a kebab or a piece of pizza after coming out of a nightclub and it's the best thing you've ever tasted, that is literally how I ate this sausage roll.
Yeah, yeah.
But the emotion that came over me was nurture. I'd nurtured myself. I'd given to myself something that I required at that time. And the spaciousness that allowed me in my person to just be content. And so that's where I really think I started to formulate this idea of never having these really hard and fast rules around things. And I guess what my colleague was looking for was these, you need to do this and you need to do this and you need to do this. And I was like, what a great way to put yourself into a stressful, deficient state.
Yes.
So first and foremost, while we might have values around eating good food, getting good exercise, I think one of the main things, and Qigong has literally taught this to me, it's something that it allows you, is this spaciousness in your being to just be. And you find that beingness inside yourself, and that's a state of great empowerment and strength and resilience and being really robust, because it allows you so much malleability and pliability around life to actually navigate through in a way that serves you and is nurturing, as opposed to forcing you into these little tiny boxes of shoulds, coulds, woulds that, as we know, aren't very healthy for us. And so the biggest success there was the fact that she really took that on. And she started to give herself space around that, and really allowed her to start to build up the hormonal profile she needed to fall pregnant, the nutritional profile that she needed to build up, because she was no longer, it's like you can't hold on to sand through gripping it tightly.
Right.
Water. You need to be soft, and you need to cup it, and you need to hold it and nurture it. You can't tense it lightly. And the more we kind of try and clench onto life tightly, the more tension we create, which pulls our body out of further shape.
Yes.
Surrender and find that space. And so first and foremost, Qigong really teaches us about building that time and that space inside ourselves, which really allows the rest of our faculties to begin to soften and become more pliable, and then really fill up with the energy, the self-worth, the confidence that we need to really push ourselves, work ourselves, create ourselves, manifest ourselves forward. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. I love everything you're saying. I don't know if you know this, but I wrote a book. It's called The Mentality Workout, because going on over probably 11 or 12 years, you know, I lost a bunch of weight, and it was a mindset thing. And the mindset, though, everybody wants me to tell them a mindset, you know, like, and it wasn't that. In fact, I tell this story. I was interviewed and for Women's Health magazine. They actually interviewed me, and we did about 6 hours of on the phone conversation. This was before Zoom. And so we were just on the phone and trying to this writer was trying to understand how she could write about me, because I didn't know how to give, you know, a list. She wanted what I exercised, what I ate, what I did. And it was just so much bigger than that. It was just so much grander. I love your idea of going through your value system and figuring out how that works for your body. I do that too, because it depends. Yeah. I had a client who said she was getting some coaching about weight loss, and, you know, and she was like listening to all that, you know, trying to figure out how she was going to obey all these rules in a way. And she said, okay, but I have a problem. I like to eat some chocolate chips. Like, I keep a little bag and I'll take some chocolate chips every so often. She's like, so what am I supposed to do? And I said, enjoy them, like, because that most of the time we're eating mindlessly, you know what I mean? If your body wants some chocolate chips, listen to that body, you know, and listen to all of those things about it. And I love the way, I thought it was interesting what you said about, so we make space, we're creating space, and really what we allow ourselves is to take up space, right? It's really about, we get to that point where we say, I get to take up space in the world. So for you, it was a sausage roll. For someone else, it might not be, but you were able to take up space with your value. And that's so empowering. And that's what you're feeling through, is those kinds of things, is that feeling is what you're trying to achieve.
I think, again, it's the process of going through the Qigong, as you were saying, like learning how to soften and learning how to surrender, and that actually teaches you how to do that in reality. And first and foremost, we've got to be able to do it in here before we can do it out there. And so it really teaches the mind and the body how to access that for itself, which then will translate out into the world as your action. So if people have problems with that, doing Qigong over a period of time will actually give you that faculty and give you the facility to open up into doing that more and more.
Mm-hmm. And by doing that, we would say it's using movement of our bodies, to create that space, to feed those different parts of that Don Tien,
Exactly.
So you're going to want to
Exactly.
feed that mind, you're going to want to feed that heart space, and you're going to want to feed that body space.
And the interesting thing to note here is there's been so much research done on what they call mammalian play biology. So how mammals play. And we learn so much through play as humans. And I've got a bit of a catchphrase. I don't know if it's appropriate for this podcast, but I'm going to say it anyway. The people don't play with themselves enough. People need to spend more time playing with themselves. And Qigong really gives you the ability to play with movement, and movement will actually change your nervous system. And if we're doing the same movements every day, walking, standing, sitting, going to the fridge, maybe going on a walk with our dog, maybe just jogging, maybe it's just go to the gym. But if we're not moving outside the boundaries of our normal regular movement, then our nervous system isn't actually beginning to change or adapt. And so a lot of the way that we can learn to move and play with ourselves using Qigong and learn to play with different principles, different universal principles and things like this play actively changes our nervous system and allows us to transcribe these elements into ourselves. So just as you're saying, it gives us that ability to actually spend time with ourselves, to actually spend time with our own bodies. Which is not something we do very often.
Right. So do we do these exercises by ourselves, or do you do them with a group? Both? How does it work?
Yeah, both in groups, by yourself. Both have their benefits. Like I say to a lot of people, following along is really good, but you'll have the best workouts, the best Qigong workouts you ever had when you know how to do it for yourself and you can really deeply engage. But yeah, either in groups or in person. There are 2-man sets or 3-person, 4-person sets, ways you can do Qigongs in groups. I have a lot of people who come to my teacher training courses to learn how to use Qigong to facilitate workshops or events or retreats, how to add it into their yoga or Pilates classes, to really offer their students just a different way of engaging the body. Which it's very different from a lot of other ways of going about things. And that's why I think it holds such a medicinal value, is because whilst I said before we should be running, jumping, doing all our other exercise, our yoga, whatever it is, the Qigong underpins all that and resets our body. And so it's really something I feel that everyone can do to bring themselves back into that balance, even if they're an elite athlete. It gives them a way of resetting the body tension and getting themselves into a deep state of regeneration and relaxation. For people who are stressed at work, it's it's quite spatially easy. You don't need a lot of room. You don't need to go walking. You can do it in your house. You can do it in your backyard. It's a really good way for people to engage in a meditation that incorporates the body, a physical meditation, which, if you're someone who sat down, you've crossed your legs, you've gone into lotus, and you're like, I am going to meditate. And then you're like, what's for dinner? I can't do this. I can't sit and meditate.
Right.
As a young man, like skater boy, a lot of energy. Sitting down meditating was not something that, I could actively do well. Let's just admit that. But learning to meditate on movement and learning to focus on the body gave me something to actually focus on. It wasn't like, just focus.
Right.
It was like, focus on your body. And over a period of time of doing that, it actually gave me the ability to just meditate. Because I could actually learn to focus my mind. But to do that initially was crazy impossible.
Right.
But actually,
like most people.
Most people are like this, right? So a body-centered meditation where you're actually focusing on your body and your physiology will give, 99 out of 100 people a much better chance at actually learning to retrain and discipline their mind and learn to meditate than just trying to meditate. So, if people are out there who find that and you're like, I can't meditate, my mind doesn't want to, Qigong. It'll really help you with that.
And you also teach how to do it. And then you actually certify other people to teach it themselves, correct? Which is kind of an
That's
extra.
correct.
Yeah, that's great. That's so great.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little example? And if you're listening to this just on audio, go to YouTube and watch this if you need to. But can you give us just a little example so we kind of understand what we're talking about?
So Qigong as well, it can be done seated. So I'll do it seating right now because I will fit in the screen a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And as I said, the way of moving is super important. So a lot of Qigong movements are actually they're simple. They're not necessarily easy. And so there's a type of movement called pandiculation. Funny word, I know, but it's how cats stretch and dogs stretch. They're not stretching, they're pandiculating. And so in a lot of my courses, I go up with people how to move like this. But a really basic Qigong movement, I'm going to lift my chair up a little bit higher. There we go. Here would be simply just bringing the hands in and up and down and out. So my hands are going to go in and up, in towards my center line and up, and down and out. Now, this is where the tricky thing comes in. So my hand to start with is yang. It's flexed, like it's pushing out. By the time I get to the top, my hand wants to be relaxed. And it wants to be a yin palm. From the yin palm to down here, I need to slowly change down to yang. And from the yang palm at the bottom to the top, I need to slowly change to yin. So it's not like I'm going change, move, move. But that change has to happen the whole way through. And this is the part that I want you to meditate on right now, is just having your hands here out, slightly out to the sides of your body. And then your hands are going to be slightly flexed. And then they're going to relax up to shoulder height as they relax to being nice and yin. And then as we push down, we're pushing down, letting our hands change back to being flexed or slightly yang. Now we're going to take a breath in. As the hands rise up, slowly relaxing to being yin, and then we're going to push down slowly, letting them go yang. Now, holding your hands at the bottom here for a moment, I want you to imagine you can feel two basketballs and they're pushed down under some water. Okay? Now, if I was just to take my hand off, that basketball would blobble to the top of the water. And so what we want to do is we want to be very slow and controlled, resisting that basketball wanting just to float to the top of the water as we raise our hands. And now the ball is at the top of the water. We want to push it down through the water. And you might notice there's a little bit of kind of assumed resistance there. This is good. This is what we want to start building up in our body. So we would breathe in and we would release that basketball to the top of the water, making sure to be super mindful so the basketball doesn't slip out from our hands and float to the top. And then we want to be super mindful to keep control of the basketball as we push it down, submerging it in the water. And we would rest our mind right on the edge of movement. And so in that movement, and it's nice to put your mind into a peripheral state. So while you're sitting there, Michelle, like put yourself into a nice peripheral state of vision. I know you may like to watch me on the screen, but if you can't, put your ears into a peripheral state and try to create that nice space and just take a few breaths to really try and open up and relax and rest your mind on the movement of the hands up, that change of the wrist. Be completely, intimately focused on the change of the arms and then the pressing down, pushing the basketballs down into the water, resting your mind right on the edge of that movement. And just focusing, I sometimes say focus on physiology. Rest your mind on the movement. You're just looking for every tiny increment of movement and just resting your mind onto that movement. Good. Now, of course, when we do that in the challenge, we add the breathing mechanics into that. We're standing up, there's a rocking backwards and forwards, and we start to build up what I like to call like a global or a whole body movement, where the movement's happening as a consequence of the breathing is happening as a consequence of the moving, the mind is resting right on the edge of that movement. And I don't know if you or if people watching got that feeling right then, but it can be quite opening, quite relaxing, quite softening, just to actually focus your mind on your physical body. It brings our mind back into contact with the body and starts to infuse mind and body back together, as opposed to us just using our minds and thinking our body's just some kind of apparatus that gets things done for our brain, and we start to re-knit those back together.
Yeah, it felt like immediately almost like I asked myself even, what does this feel like? And it was almost, the thing that came to me was like, it was almost like there's just enough. That was the feeling, as it was just, it's like things will get done, like there was just this enoughness. I don't know how else quite to describe it, even in that little small demonstration that I really appreciate that you showed us. But it's like, the body, that was it years ago when I asked, to learn about this kind of stuff, it was the body is this communicator. We need to listen to the body. We need to hear what the body has to say. We need to ask the body questions. It was a dialogue with the physical body, and it's been empowering in my life ever since I have taken that advice. And so I love that I didn't know there was a way for people to kind of learn that easier, because it's easy. It's better to just experience it rather than just tell you about it. And that's what I think it
needs to be experienced, doesn't it? Because otherwise we just think about it. And I think that's the way we think in the world. We're like mind, body, whereas the Chinese are like, no, mind, body.
Right.
They're one and the same. They're not separate. Right. And we need to stop separating them. We need to bring the mind back in to be part of the body. To be, that integration. Yeah, otherwise, it's really that we're looking at doing with our Qigong, so everything re-knits, and it's that brings us back our health.
Yes. Well, and we use a lot of that. The word wholeness, and so I always ask my guests, what does wholeness mean to you, or how do you identify with that concept of wholeness, or how do you define wholeness?
Again, I think wholeness is a state of being when we are all of ourselves, when we stop trying to use that contrived mind, like probably that very wu-wei state where action through non-action, without even trying, things just happen, things manifest. We move through life with that nice balance, like a river just moving through, as opposed to trying to force things. And I think, and again, it's quite often funny when I think I originally thought like this too, that sounds like a really mystical state or something that's hard to attain. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we don't try for things, but we're not forcing. And so it really allows you to exert all of you and to have access to all of you to use for the things that you want to do. And so really that idea of wholeness is where we have access to all parts of ourselves so that we can use them as required. And it's just like, oh, this puzzle needs this little piece of me, or this puzzle needs this little piece of me. And it allows us to move through life without getting caught and snagged on the spiky, sticky parts of life that trip us up, and allow us to navigate that a little bit smoother. As I said, using all of ourselves to navigate life.
Feel empowered every day with wholeness videos, meditations, downloads, classes, and more by joining the Wholeness Library at thewholenessnetwork.com.